Across the United States, students grade the papers of their fellow pupils and then announce aloud the results to the teacher. For many teachers, this is a real time saver. But Kris Falvo feels it's an embarrassing and degrading violation of her children's privacy. And her battle has taken her all the way to the Supreme Court. This week, the court heard her case and a decision is pending. Please welcome our real-life hot topic, Kris Falvo. Welcome to this court.
Thank you. Thank you.
Kris, you have 4 children. From 11 to 17. As a mom, why are you so opposed to kids grading each other's papers and announcing the results in class?
Well, being a mother of 4, I think everyone understands that every child is different, and this is the one thing that affected all my children. Not just one of them, but all 4 of them.
In a bad way?
In a bad way, in a harmful way. So it was very difficult.
I want to specifically address Philip. Your son, Philip, who is now 15 years old, was actually being, I understand, ridiculed and humiliated in class. He was in the 6th grade at that time because fellow students were grading his test. When was the first time you became aware that there was a real issue with your son?
Well, like any mom, you know, they bring their backpack home. I can hardly wait to see their work. And so I'm just, you know, pulling stuff out, and I'm seeing papers that have, you know, graded by Becky or good job, try harder. I'm thinking, who's grading these papers? And then, you know, and pretty soon my son, he gets really quiet. He goes up to his room, and I start noticing a problem. So I, of course, like any mom, knock on the door, and I keep asking him, and he finally says, you know, they're calling out my grade, or I call out my grade, kids are calling me stupid, and it was so hard to know that this was going on.
Krisha, was he ever physically abused by any of the students?
You know, I think that was the hardest thing to go through, was the fact that the name calling is one thing, and emotional abuse is one thing, but then to have him singled out and then have instances where he would push, you know, groups that push him into the locker and stuff, it was heartbreaking. I don't know, you know, like there's a lot of parents out here that wouldn't want to have that happen.
Well, we talk about bullies all the time in this show. We hate the whole idea, but there are some critics that say that you went a little too far, that children do experience this type of thing and they need to develop some scabs about it, you know, and a tougher skin. How do you answer that?
Well, you know, we talk about education and how important it is for our children to learn. And I'm thinking my child's going to school and he's learning humiliation 101 or how to survive bullies. And I don't think, you know, life is hard enough right now. And I don't think it's necessary to make an environment more harmful for these kids.
Yeah. What happened when you actually confronted the teachers about this?
Well, when I first confronted the teachers, I was told, we've always done it this way. It's always been that way, and you're the only parent who ever brought this up. And I'm like, well, that's odd. Yeah. That's really odd. And it made me wonder, you know, why I was the only one up there.
Yeah. Well, you know, I used to be a teacher. I was an English teacher, actually. And I know that these teachers in Oklahoma, they have about 140 students a day, which I think is, I don't know if that's average or what, but that means 140 papers a night to mark. So this is the reason, I think, that they give it to the other students. Not that I think it's such a great idea, but 140 papers a night is a lot of work for a teacher. Do you have an answer for that?
Yes, you know, it's funny because my husband was a high school teacher, but you have to realize that you don't have to mark 140 papers a night. And there were teachers in the Owasso School District that did not have students exchange papers. Or if they wanted to, they could do it anonymously. They could put ID numbers on it. Or they could have the student grade their own papers. So I'm not asking that these teachers take 140 papers home a night and work until the wee hours of the morning. There was teachers in Owasso who had never asked students to grade each other's papers. They took care of it themselves.
Yeah, I think we all agree that teachers are under an enormous amount of pressure and they're grossly underpaid, but I think there are other ways they could do it. Like, for example, they don't have to read the test scores out loud. I think that is the most humiliating thing. Would you settle for that?
Well, I can't understand why we should settle for that. If I have my neighbor know my grade and then I take it up or it's private, he still knows. And I guarantee you the way schools are, everybody's going to know. Exactly. And so I just don't think that
What about putting a number on the test?
That's what they do in my kids'
school.
Like an ID number? Oh, yes. I mean, that's what they do now. Remember, we won at the 10th Circuit Court, so for a year and a half, that's what they've been doing. It's anonymous. They exchange if they want to use ID numbers, or they grade their own papers, which I think my kids have really benefited because they get immediate feedback. They know exactly what they did wrong. Not what somebody else, but they
Well, the argument has been that some kids might cheat if they're grading their own paper.
Well, some kids want to go, I want him to grade. Yeah.
Lisa said what's this one?
When I cheated when I graded my own paper,
Oh, well, the
Well,
easiest thing is to let your best friend.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, well, if you don't want to cheat, then the teacher should have to grade all the papers. So
you can always find a way to cheat. That's not a problem. You know, Christian, I read, and I want to make sure that I'm clear, that your son has a bit of a learning disability. Is that correct?
He was diagnosed with a learning disability when he was younger. Yes.
So he may have some trouble in school in and of itself. Do you think if your son had not had a learning disability and had not been basically the subject of this horrible bullying, you'd also have been pushing this hard?
You know,
Is it personal
I have
for you?
Yes, I have 4 children. And I don't think just because one child has special needs doesn't mean that the other children aren't entitled to that same amount of privacy. And so, yes, I mean, I have 4 children and I care about all of them. And I actually, when I started, it was my children. But now I feel like every child, every family has a right to this privacy.
It's all about privacy.
Yes, it's about family privacy.
I want to acknowledge someone in the audience, Will Wright. He represented you in front of the Supreme Court. Now, Will, when Kristia came to you, did you ever think that this issue would go all the way to the Supreme Court?
Absolutely not. I told Kris, look, I'll write a letter to the school district. This will go away. They responded, we've been doing this for 25 years. I said, Kris, this is their response. Kris told me, you know, that was the same thing that they were saying back when there was segregation in schools. That was the same thing they were saying when women were second-class citizens. I said, go girl, we'll go get them. Yeah. You want me to do something? I can do it. We'll go to court. You give me the green light. It's your fight. We'll fight it.
Good for you.
How do your kids feel about this? Because obviously your son, he didn't like being singled out and noticed to begin with in the classroom, and now this has catapulted all your kids to a great deal of attention.
Ironically, during the beginning of this, my children, a couple of them, were taking civics classes. And so, of course, we're in the book and we're reading about what our country stands for and people standing up for things. And so we really started to make it a history lesson and actually make it a life, you know, lesson for us. And so now, you know, they've learned to be very proud of it, and they're actually more outspoken now, you know, for certain rights or bullying.
So they become more assertive. That's a bonus.
Yes, they have. I think they know that it's okay to say, you know, I think this is wrong. I think we can do something different.
Good for you for standing up for what you believe. And we should hear something within, what, maybe 30 to 60 days, Will? Is that right?
At the earliest, it'll be 30 to 60 days, at the latest next June.
Okay. Thank you so much to Kris Falvo. We will be right back.
Thank you.